When you hear the name Genghis Khan, what do you see? A brutal conqueror on horseback. A merciless warrior leading a horde that swept across the world, leaving nothing but destruction in its wake. This is the image history has handed down to us, a force of nature, an unstoppable tide of savagery. But what if that image is a carefully crafted illusion? What if the most fearsome weapon in the Mongol arsenal wasn't the composite bow or the swiftness of their horses? What if Genghis Khan's greatest strength was a secret? Not a single trick, but a revolutionary system of strategy so far ahead of its time, it seemed almost like magic to his enemies. Today, we pull back the curtain on the accepted history. We're not just looking at the warrior, we're looking at the grandmaster, the spy master, the psychologist. This is the story of Genghis Khan's secret strategy, the hidden intelligence network and radical social engineering that truly built the largest contiguous empire the world has ever known. The foundation of the Mongol Empire wasn't built on stone, but on fear. But it wasn't the mindless terror of a barbarian. It was calculated, weaponized psychology. Before a single Mongol arrow was fired, the battle for the enemy's mind was already underway. Imagine you are the ruler of a walled city in Persia. For weeks, you've heard rumors from traveling merchants. They speak of an army from the east, a horde so vast it drinks rivers dry. They say each soldier commands not one, but 3, 4, even 5 horses, making their numbers seem endless. Then, one night, you look out from your walls. On the horizon, you don't see one campfire for every soldier. You see 5, a sea of flickering lights stretching into the darkness, confirming the terrifying rumors. Your soldiers' morale plummets. This wasn't chaos. It was a deliberate tactic. Genghis Khan ordered every man to light multiple fires to create an illusion of an impossibly large army. The psychological assault didn't stop there. Mongol scouts, often disguised as traders or refugees, would infiltrate enemy lands years in advance. They didn't just map out roads and water sources. They gathered intelligence on political rivalries, disgruntled nobles, and ethnic tensions. They learned who to bribe, who to flatter, and who to threaten. By the time the Mongol army arrived, they often knew more about a kingdom's internal weaknesses than the king himself. They would sow discord, turning factions against each other, weakening the entire structure from within before the first siege engine was even built. But how do you coordinate such a sophisticated campaign of espionage and warfare across a continent? You need a nervous system. You need to move information faster than anyone else. Genghis Khan's answer was one of his most brilliant and underappreciated creations, the yam. Think of it as the 13th century internet. The yam was a massive, state-sponsored relay system of postal stations, strategically placed about 25 to 30 miles apart. Each station was staffed and stocked with fresh riders, food, and, most importantly, hundreds of fresh horses. A Mongol messenger carrying a royal decree or an urgent intelligence report could ride at a full gallop to a yam station, grab a fresh horse, and continue without a moment's rest. If the rider was exhausted, a new rider would take his place. These messengers carried special medallions, giving them the authority to take anything they needed from anyone, ensuring their journey was never delayed. How fast was it? While regular communication in Europe or China might travel 20 to 30 miles in a day, a message on the yam could cover 200 miles. This incredible speed allowed Genghis Khan to command his armies, which were often separated by hundreds of miles, as if they were a single entity. He could react to threats, exploit opportunities, and coordinate multi-pronged attacks with a speed that seemed supernatural to his enemies. The yam wasn't just for military messages. It was the logistical backbone of the entire empire, used by merchants and envoys. It connected the vast territories, making trade safer and communication reliable. It was the unseen network that held the empire together. Genghis Khan's genius wasn't just in how he fought his enemies, but in how he organized his own people. In a world defined by tribal loyalties and aristocratic privilege, he created a revolutionary concept, a true meritocracy. Your position in the Mongol army wasn't determined by who your father was. It was determined by one thing and one thing only: your ability, your loyalty, your skill, your courage. There is no better example than the story of Jeeb. In a battle in 1201, Genghis Khan's horse was shot out from under him by an enemy archer. After winning the battle, he demanded to know who fired the shot. A soldier stepped forward and boldly confessed, "I am the man who shot your horse. If you kill me, I am yours to dispose of. But if you let me live, I will serve you faithfully." Genghis Khan, impressed by his courage and honesty, didn't just spare him. He made him an officer. That man, Jeeb, rose through the ranks to become one of the Khan's greatest and most loyal generals, a legendary commander known as the Arrow. This was unheard of. He shattered old tribal structures, mixing different clans and peoples into new military units. This broke down old rivalries and fostered a new, unbreakable loyalty not to a tribe, but to the Khan himself and to the man fighting beside you. This radical idea created the most disciplined, loyal, and skilled fighting force on the planet. Psychology, logistics, and meritocracy were the foundations. But on the battlefield, the Mongols were masters of the ultimate trap, the feigned retreat. This tactic wasn't new, but under Mongol command, it was perfected into a deadly art form. Here's how it worked. A small contingent of Mongol cavalry would charge a much larger enemy force. They'd fight briefly, then suddenly break and flee in apparent panic. For their heavily armored and often arrogant European or Persian adversaries, this was an irresistible sight. They would see what they expected to see: weak, undisciplined nomads running for their lives. The knights or heavy infantry would give chase, breaking their own formations in their eagerness to crush the fleeing enemy. They would charge for miles, becoming exhausted, their lines stretched thin and disorganized. And that's when the trap would spring. The fleeing Mongols were actually leading them into a prearranged kill zone. Suddenly, the main Mongol army, hidden in reserve on the flanks, would appear. The fleeing Mongol unit would turn, fresh and ready, and attack the front. The enemy was now enveloped, exhausted, and in chaos. It was a slaughter. This tactic worked time and time again because it exploited the enemy's arrogance. They consistently underestimated the discipline and cunning of the Mongol warrior. They saw chaos, but it was perfectly controlled, surgically precise deception. So what was Genghis Khan's secret strategy? It was the realization that an empire is conquered not just with swords, but with information. Not just with soldiers, but with loyalty. Not just with brute force, but with a brilliant, calculating mind. His secret was the system. A system of psychological warfare that broke an enemy's will. A logistical network, the YAM, that moved information faster than any rival. A social revolution of meritocracy that forged an army of unparalleled skill and loyalty. And a battlefield doctrine of deception that turned an enemy's pride into their downfall. The image of the barbarian horde is the propaganda. It's the story the Mongols wanted their enemies to believe. The reality was something far more terrifying. A unified, disciplined, and brilliantly led organization that was, in every sense, ahead of its time. The empire of Genghis Khan eventually fractured, but his strategies and innovations in warfare, communication, and leadership echoed through history, forever changing the world. The greatest secret of all, the world's most famous conqueror was also one of its most brilliant innovators.